And we're here again. So, hello everyone. Welcome to another episode of Hazardous Area Safety. Today I've got Derek Cross on the show with us. He's from GexCon. And Derek, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Good to be here.
And I thought it'd be right to kick this off correctly by introducing yourself. So over to you.
Yep, sure. So as Trevor said, I'm Derek Cross. I'm the team lead for GexCon Australia. We're a process safety consultancy. We're over in Perth. And yeah, I look after a smallish team, but there's about 10 of us in the team of engineers doing process safety tasks and projects for companies all over Australia and New Zealand and Asia Pacific and more widely the world.
So that's
me.
That's you.
Yeah.
Excellent. So here's a question that I often ask everyone. Well, how did you come into being go back to Derek Cross at university? Was this always on the agenda, or was this something that just happened to you?
No, it's a good question. So I'm a mech engineer, graduated from UWA just many years ago, 2001, I think. My first job, so around early 2000s, we were in a bit of a downturn for the engineering industry, so it was hard to get work. And I got a job as a project engineer with Aker Kværner, which was great. Cut my teeth building stuff and reading P&IDs and learning how workshops work and things like that. And my wife, who I met at uni, is also a mech engineer. She was struggling to get work at the time, and down to the point of like cold calling people, really, like sending out letters. And she got a job with Worley. They were Worley in those days, I think. Hadn't become past since then. And she was taken into this industry we'd never heard of called technical safety. We didn't really call it safety and risk, I think we were calling it then. And she worked on a big project, a facility called Bayunden, helped on the design side, big greenfield project, and she loved it, absolutely loved it. And she was there for about a couple of years and then went on and stayed with Worley for like 15 years. After a couple of years doing project engineering, I did enjoy it, but it was it's the same thing over and over again. And I kind of was like, getting a little bit bored doing this. What else is out in the world? And I knew she was having a lot of fun, and she was enjoying it. So I thought, let's see what this is like. And so started looking around, and found a job in safety and risk, or risk and safety, with a small consultancy called IRC. And jumped across, more or less became a graduate again. I was only been 2 years out at that stage, so I was really a graduate anyway. And stuck with it. So did that. Was at IRC for like 5 or 6 years. Did another 5 or 6 years at Worley. Got some good greenfield experience. Went across to Aberdeen. Worked in Scotland for a couple of years. Came back, and then ultimately through Worley, they had the engineering support contract for ConocoPhillips at that stage. Funnily enough, supporting Bayunden, the facility my wife had been on the design project for, and other places. And so I moved to Darwin and was part of the process safety as we were starting to sort of call process safety, and in those days, sort of early 2010s, was becoming more and more common a term. Moved into the process safety team up there, ended up moving to Conoco, spent sort of 13 years with them. So, it wasn't, I guess as an industry we kind of fell into a little bit, but a little bit by design, because as I said, my wife was there. She's always been in that industry. She still is. She works at Woodside. And kind of went there because it looked interesting. I knew she was enjoying it. It was good people and just the concept of what they were doing, and then I guess the safety side of it appealed, and it still does. As I learned more about the industry and about what we do, the more I kind of it appealed to me more. I guess when I first went in, I didn't really know much about it, but yeah, that was more or less it.
The whole industry has changed in that short amount of time anyway. Like from there's been a rapid adoption of safety and procedural safety and process safety in the last, say, 30 years, more than there probably has been in any other time of history. So have you felt during your career that you've seen some dramatic shifts, and do you have any kind of incidents or any experience of when a dramatic event or when a change occurred that was of such a magnitude that hadn't been seen before?
I've got a couple of personal ones.
It's all right to say no as well.
No. It's a good question. I think you can have the industry ones. I mean, obviously Piper and things like that, where there's a
Yeah.
like a wholesale shift to more awareness. I mean, you talk to every time there's an anniversary, and there's not too many people. Obviously, there aren't too many survivors of Piper anyway, and then there's obviously less of them now. I remember we used to have a guy, Gary, who he wasn't on Piper, but he used to go out there as a contractor on rotating equipment. And I remember him talking, this is at Conoco, him talking and saying, they weren't cowboys. It wasn't like they didn't, Deepwater Horizon is probably another example. It's not like they didn't think they were doing the right thing. It's not on Piper. It's not like they didn't think they were managing safety. It's just their understanding of what could happen was maybe lacking to where we are at the moment. So obviously you've got your big industry ones like that. To your point about have we seen an increase, I think we have. I think we've had a growing, like environment as well, we have a growing awareness of process safety. Certainly personally, when I first kind of moved into operations, I think, there was very little awareness of things like regulatory documents, safety cases, safety reports. There was probably not a lot of awareness of process safety and the KPIs that can use to be measured and the importance of them. Through a decade in operations, the shift I saw from the attitudes, also attitudes early, because it wasn't like people didn't value it. It's just they probably weren't aware, to the knowledge and values people had by the end of those 10 years were just like polar opposites, and it was a great experience to go through, and I'd love to claim credit for it, but we were only part of it. A lot of it, that classic thing of what's important to your boss is important to you. We had some very good managers at Conoco on process safety, and they valued it. They truly valued it, and they sort of fed that to the organisation. And I think by the time Conoco moved out of the West, which is the part I was in, they were in a great place for process safety. Process safety is one of those journeys you never finish, and not like they were anywhere near the end, but they'd come such a long way. No. They were tracking stuff, they understood stuff, they were actively trying to improve. And so when I look at why it was so important to them, to those managers, they had some incidents, classic things, in various parts of the world. So thankfully nothing that was sort of fatal, nothing to the sort of, again, Deepwater Horizon scale, but they had some pretty big scares. And it's unfortunate that, incidents, sometimes it takes an incident to really hit home the importance of some of this stuff to people. And that was the case for them. It would be nice if people picked up the lessons without it, but such a regular thing. But that's what it was to them. They'd had some incidents, and then they'd learnt from that, and they'd brought that belief to our area when they moved to Australia, and we reaped the benefit of it. I mean, we had some local stuff, which again, they weren't incidents. They were more what we used to call weak signals. Corrosion we weren't expecting, or failures on tests that we weren't expecting, and things like that. Smaller ones that, again, we were like, oh, that's a bit of a scare, and we reacted to it.
It's just an anomaly.
Yeah. But yeah, the ability that we were able to pick up those weak signals and react to them again, and we had the capacity to react to them. That partly came, well, not partly, a lot of it came from these management team who'd given us, I guess, license to listen to weak signals, as opposed to like, no, just keep it running, dollars. It's like, no, okay, what's that telling you? Is that important? Do we need to stop? We got those messages a lot, and that's very empowering. When a business truly believes that stuff, they go a long way down that process safety path. So yeah, that was sort of, I think, in terms of maybe not standalone, like these events shaped what we've seen and where we've seen industry go, but on a personal level, that was sort of the catalyst, I think, to the process safety growth I've seen in the industry.
So kind of instead of seeing as you said, instead of seeing one specific event, you've been you've been moved by seeing a culture being integrated into a business, and then you've been able to see the effects of that investment of that culture long term
That's
as
a good way
well.
of putting it. I think process safety culture is a big thing, and it's a very hard thing. You know,
Yeah.
it's if people don't see the value of what process safety is bringing to them, or the environment protection, whatever your industry is, whatever your discipline is, if you're working in a business and they don't value it, it's very hard to make any headway because you're always pushing it uphill. People don't value what you're bringing. QA quality is another one. I used to look after a quality team, and if you're working in a business that doesn't actually value QA QC, because it's until like HSE is the same. Until something goes wrong, it's very easy to view it as an overhead. What are you bringing? You're not making anything.
It's just
Yeah.
ROI. What's the
Yeah.
ROI for this? What's the case study for it? What's a
And
business case for it?
there's all those
All the time.
cliches like, oh well, you think safety is expensive, wait till I have an accident, but they're all true. But it's very hard to put a value on that. But yeah, sorry, yeah.
That's such a it's such an old way of such an old way of thinking, because you're thinking from a standpoint of fear. Like you're thinking, okay, well, we're only going to do something if something goes wrong, or you're using that as your argument. It's just a weak argument. So as you said, when you've seen firsthand the benefits and the long-term outcomes that happen when a culture is embedded into a business unit, and that business unit has been given agency to do their work, and you've seen the benefit of that long term.
And that's I think the one thing I took away from that whole experience was it takes time. Like, it's never a quick journey, but you really can cultural change around things like process safety is definitely possible. You've just got to go in with the desire to do so. If you just wait around and go, oh well, we'll just keep doing what we're doing and it'll just come around, it probably won't. Like, there was a specific shift in attitude. There were certain things done. We did look at it as a process safety team. We looked at it pretty specifically, but obviously we had the backing of the business to do it. So certain activities were taken, training was taken, familiarization was taken, just sort of talking the talk day to day, but talking the talk across the whole business. That was probably the biggest thing, to be honest. And also having, again, like reiterating the leader part, having the leadership actually really take the message to people. This is important. We genuinely think this is important. We're not just saying the words. We're not just paying lip service to process safety. We do believe it.
Yeah.
Probably took a couple of years for the business to understand that they genuinely meant it. But once they got it, man, the shift was really tangible and pretty quick.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a great experience, because I can always kind of bring that to other organizations and say, look, it's possible. I've seen it done. I've really genuinely seen it done. And you got to actually believe that that's what you want to achieve, and put the resources and the time and the, I just say, sort of like give people the freedom to do it, and it's possible.
Yeah. So like, because a lot of we talk about, if we talk about this, like safety and compliance, like it come in the industry, it comes like one doesn't come without the other. And what I don't know if upset's the right word, but it's just lack of a better word, is they're two different portions. And what you touched on there is the importance of leadership adopting a language around safety and not providing that lip service. But leadership's only one part of the puzzle, and I feel personally that, like, a lot of the responsibility lies with leadership. And yes, it's easier for things to flow downhill than pushing it uphill. But what if we look at, say, let's just look at a practical solution here, or let's just tease something out. If you went to a company today and the leadership were all on board and adopting a new kind of culture, what kind of actionable steps would you advise that potential client in how to integrate that into their workflow, their team, their training. So the vision of the leadership was actually distilled into actionable steps. Where would you go from there?
That's good. It's good. I can only bring my experience of what we did, and obviously different companies have different experiences. But so again, to use Conoco, that's where most of this experience came from for me. That's all right.
Sorry.
We didn't have a stated process safety management system, so we had a safety management system, but early on we did sort of say, okay, and we talked about establishing a specific document that said this is our process safety management system, but we went through some of the process safety management models and we went, okay, well, let's just assure ourselves that we can satisfy where the elements of this framework sit. So we did that, went through, okay. We did go through and do a bit of a gap analysis as to areas that we felt were covered by the safety management system, by the current compliance and audit system. Are there any areas that we were like, yep, that sits under the quality system, that sits under HSC audits, that sits under contractor management. Just leave that where it is. Went through, okay, what else is missing? We had a good look at the metrics we were measuring. A little bit related to those elements of the management system. So, okay, MOCs, operating deviations, are we managing those? Do we have a system in place? Yes, we do. Are we checking the health of that system? Oh, yes, we are. Maybe we're not. Maybe we need to check that a bit better. So we had a look at what we were measuring. We had a look at we tried to close the gaps on stuff we weren't measuring. We had a look at the quality of the data we were getting as well from our reporting system, and we came to realize that we were getting okay data on process safety metrics, but it wasn't complete. And a big part of that was did some surveys. In the process safety team, my predecessor did 2 surveys, which was to gauge the understanding of what it was as a business we wanted to know and what the understanding of that was. And what it became very clear is when we spoke about process safety incidents that we wanted to know about, the business didn't understand the same thing. So we went through, we did an educational process. We did, the solution to this stuff isn't always train people more, but in this case, there was a little bit of that. So we went through and we did an education process on like, this is what the metrics are and this is what we want to know about. Now, there was a fundamental shift in understanding at that point because we wanted to know about the little leaks. Because again, we defined them as a process safety tier 3 event, and we wanted to know about them because they were weak signals. Tell us about the little leaks before they're dangerous. Now, we probably couldn't have done that if the business didn't turn around and say, you will not be punished for telling us about the little leaks. In fact, we will be rewarded, and they did that. So we saw like 100% increase in reporting of small leaks. Now, on the surface, and we had to explain this to people, we had to explain it to the regulator, we had to explain it to our wider business. Why all of a sudden you have all these reports? Why all of a sudden is your facility leaking like nothing else? It's like, well, actually, it already did. We just know about it now. So that then helped us with the backing of the company. Once we had sort of 6 months worth of data, we could start putting some analytics behind it and go, what's breaking, what's leaking, where, and then we could start having monthly campaigns to say, you know what, that thing's failing and it's failed 3 times now. So we need to know more about that. Just from a process safety perspective. That fire water monitor has been a bit dinky and it always has been. Or we're seeing an uptake in these sort of leaks. We're seeing this. And so once we started having that, we could then have a feedback loop into the business to say, hey, this is the areas of process safety we're concerned about at the moment. So I guess it was a bit of a journey like that, but it was sort of understanding where we're okay, or, not okay, but tolerably all right, where our gaps were, looking at the framework of the process safety management sort of framework, working on those gaps, making sure we were measuring the right data, making sure that people understood what we wanted to know, making sure we had the support of the business. And the background of all this is that, you always, we had things like, and this was off the back of the management team, they started a thing called the Process Safety Book Club. So we had a fortnightly meeting, a monthly meeting, can't remember, where we would all pick a process safety related book, lessons from Longford or something like that. And we'd all read it and we'd talk about it. And it sounds kind of bit naff, but actually it really worked because you'd have people from ops there, you'd have engineers there, you'd have process safety people there, and it just got the conversation happening. And once again, we had senior management there doing it, and so it showed that this thing was important to them. Did it at lunchtime, so it was on our own time. So you had this undercurrent of discussion from managers to OAMs to sort of ops supers about process safety, and then more and more people understood that this thing was important. Conversations were happening more. For me, one of the things that was okay, we're getting somewhere is like early on when I first went into ops or ops support, it was like, what's the safety case? What's formal safety assessment? By the end of this, or towards the end of the process, had people picking up the phone and people in the engineering team saying, we're going to do this MOC. Does it have an impact on the safety case? It's not just the fact that the awareness that this document actually existed, but the awareness enough of what was in it to know that this thing they're going to do might impact it. And so that was a real journey. And so it was kind of those steps that they understand. Probably the big thing from what we saw was the understanding of what it was that needed to be reported, what counted as a process safety incident. Yes. The fact that it didn't have to be a big fire, the little stuff, the fact that PSV lifted when it's not meant to, things like that. The uptick in data we got from that to then be able to do some analysis, and again, having the time, being awarded the time by the business to do the analysis. So we weren't just fighting fires all the time. We actually had enough spare time to go and look at this stuff. We had enough resources to go and look at the data to then feed it back to the business so we can actually demonstrate the tangible benefit of it. And that's that sort of self-fulfilling then, because then you go, okay, well, we're getting less of this stuff, but more of this stuff. And you can demonstrate active process safety management.
So a couple of things that you've touched on with this example, and that's perfect because you've stated some of the fears and trepidation that businesses actually have, because when they're going through this massive change from the current state to a desired state of being able to understand what process safety means, not for them in general, but for their organization and all of the interaction points for that. And that covers off on their engineering, their operations, and also their maintenance team as well. Being able to introduce a reward system to get people to identify where things are, and being able to engage with external stakeholders, regulators, and departmental authorized officers, that provides such a safety net for the platform that you're trying to introduce. So do you want to expand on, were there any reservations during that? Was there any, there would have been maybe nervousness, but was there any resistance with that?
Yes, definitely. I think, and I mean, I don't want to get the impression it was perfect as well, because there's always missteps when you're going through something like this. And there definitely were. And it's not that they ever got it to the point that I was like, yeah, this is absolutely nailed. The natural progression of what they were trying to do, and this steps outside process safety more into HSC, which is less of my area, but they were moving down a just culture. So, more of a trying to understand that, when we look at incidents, it's often not the human. Someone's probably made a mistake, but what's the factor behind why they made the mistake? Were they rushed? Was it perceived time pressure? Did they understand what they were, was the procedure well written? All those sort of factors. And again, that's going outside my area. But that was sort of where some of this process safety stuff was going, is to go, look, we've had this incident, but really it wasn't Joe Blow on the tools. It was the fact that this thing was, QA, QC was poor, or it was a counterfeit part, or, whatever. It's just the end of service life or something. We haven't maintained it enough, and all those things. There was huge hesitation around that, because there was a thought process around just culture that it was going to remove the ability to say it's your fault, which obviously it's kind of part of it, but sometimes it is your fault. Sometimes someone does make a mistake and they need to be trained or need to be disciplined or whatever. And that's obviously not the purpose of just culture, but there was a concern that it would be that, if we go down a no blame culture, then no one can ever be blamed. And so we can never discipline people. And the closer you get to the ops environment, the more there was a concern about that. And I got to say, by the time the business was winding up, they never resolved it. and they were sort of nominally going down a just culture sort of model, but it never really rolled it out. And I'm not sure they ever really got to the bottom of how this thing would work. There was a lot of workshopping of it and stuff, and flow charts about decision making and things like that. So there was a hesitancy around that, definitely. When we did see, like I mentioned before, when we did see an uptick in reporting, I don't think there was a local hesitancy, but there was a lot of stakeholder engagement around the fact that we needed to. It wasn't an uptake in incidents. We weren't suddenly hurting people. We weren't suddenly having these big events. It was we were simply reporting and measuring the small stuff that we already knew was happening. That was probably the other big one. And again, that hesitancy didn't last long because we were able to demonstrate the benefit to it. But yeah, they were probably the main ones. I think going back right to what we suggested at the start, there's always a bit of a perception that process safety it's red tape, it's overhead. So anytime you introduce another step to a process or another check or another balance, you got to be very, very careful that you can demonstrate why that's necessary. Because again, if we added three or four more layers of approval to an MOC, and all the MOCs all the management change processes all of a sudden take 4 months, not 3 months, you're going to get asked some tough questions of why. And that's probably fair. So we did try to be careful around that sort of stuff. If we were adding levels of compliance or assurance, we needed to be very, very careful that we needed them. And we, again, from a management point of view, we probably were asking some good questions in those spaces, and some changes we stuck with and some changes we didn't. In the end, no company is a charity. They're all here to make money. So we did need to have to demonstrate. Again, it's difficult with process safety. We didn't have to demonstrate the reason for why we were doing things, if not the monetary value, just actually the logic. So there was some hesitation around certain parts, yes.
But I think that what I found specifically in the safety space, storytelling and accountability become kind of a big portion of the job, because you're taking people's innate feeling to be cared for, and you're showing them that yes, things can be better, but they're not to blame for it. And as soon as that's the reason why I asked if there was hesitation. When an outside organisation or a new player comes in and they're inheriting a problem or inheriting a site, if there's a lot of resistance typically with that new person to get the momentum behind them to introduce the change that they want to have, because there's that reluctance or that perception that, well, like, I'm wrong. I've been doing things wrong. And as soon as you can remove that from the equation and say, listen, guys, like, we're not saying that you've done the wrong thing. We're just saying that there's a better way of doing it. And what you guys have done is great, but we're transitioning to a better way. That conversation's that hard.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. I do remember I think we were fortunate in then what we were trying to do was building on what people had been doing already, and we were building on, I guess, standing on the shoulders of giants sort of thing. That conversation of that, we got to be careful about not trying to get the perception that people have been doing it wrong, as you say. I think we had the discussion, but it wasn't that hard to do in the end, because again, they were already on the journey. We just sort of were looking at the areas of where we were lacking. I think the point about the storytelling as well, like you were making, that reminded me, go back to the original point around, some of the events, like I said, we had some senior managers who'd lived through some stuff, and they didn't do it very often, which I think it probably makes sense. Like, you don't want to devalue these things, but every now and then they would talk about those experiences. I had two senior managers, one was operations based and one was my direct boss. And one of them was investigating fatality, which is always very confronting, and the other one was a gas release. And when they did talk about it, my goodness, it was powerful stuff. Like they they're not the most naturally gifted speakers, but it's so powerful to them. And if anything, the fact that they weren't naturally gifted speakers probably actually made it more powerful because you could see the emotion to them. And just to reiterate that point of what you said, the storytelling and having guys who have these stories and can convey them and are willing to do so. Yeah, you don't want to do it too often because it's hard work for them. It was part of the journey. It was part of why these things were important to them personally, but also they were able to then help bring those values to the company because they could tell the stories of what they'd been through. So,
I think with the particularly around incidents and fatalities, it takes. I've seen it go either way. I've seen people being able to recount bad incidents and serious incidents and serious accidents in a very honoring way, and I've seen it on the other side where it becomes confronting and abrasive. But that's all that they can focus on. So your senior management and your boss being able to navigate that to be not navigate, but to be able to discuss it openly, but from a place of sharing rather than enforcement. That's fantastic too. That takes a lot of skill to be able to do that.
I think it didn't hurt for both of them that they're pretty empathetic people, both of them. So they could really bring it from the place of these were events that impacted people, and in both they were either people who were colleagues or people who were under their care, as a manager. So they both were, I guess, independent but also involved, and I mean, as you say, they were probably a little bit fortunate in that that was, I guess, their temperament. But it did help. Their nature.
Because if we look at it, safety gets a bit of a bad rap, I think, and it's part of what we were talking about before about kind of the marketing side of safety, about the fear aspect. You see a lot of advertisement around kind of this could be the end thing, and you see service sirens and all that kind of stuff. And I'm not saying that that's wrong. I'm just saying that the language that we use, or the marketing ploys that we use around safety, if we can have more conversations, open conversations, because at the end of the day, you don't get up in the morning and go, oh, I can't wait for this, this process line to rupture and hurt 5 of my colleagues. Everyone's going to work to work safely, to operate in a safe manner, believing that their staff and team are wanting the best for them, and to be able to come home to the people that they love. And that to me is more powerful than seeing a video clip of a couple of sirens and someone getting a blanket put over them because there's been a fatality at work.
Well, I often do, and again, everyone's different, but we've got some young engineers here, and GexCon is a consultancy, so I do like being in consultancy, but I do say to our young engineers, look, when you build your career and as you're looking at, areas you need to sort of shape yourself, you do need to either contract or be employed by a company where you can go and, I think, work in an operational environment. You don't have to be on the tools, but, from a process safety perspective, you need to go and, I think, have been exposed to a gas plant or a chemical plant, whatever your industry is. You need to go on, because in process safety, we're engineers. We're not. If an incident happens, it's not going to happen to us. It's going to happen to our colleagues. And so I think you need to experience something to help you understand what it is, where they work. The guys who are on the work front, their work environment, their day-to-day risks, and we normalize all this stuff, but obviously their day-to-day risks and things like that. And I think for me personally, that has always helped me bring process safety back to the why. That's for me. That's always been the why of going. Look, once you've walked around a gas plant or an offshore facility or a chemical plant or whatever it is, and you've gone, they're the valves, they're the flanges, they're the tube. That's the stuff. This is the stuff that's going to cause an incident. There's those vessels that have pressure, etc., etc. You can then go, okay, it's not like I'm walking around a bomb sort of thing, but you can go, you get more of an appreciation of this is this big, moving, loud, vibrating thing, and we're putting people here, and this is their job, and they enjoy it, and they want to be here, but it's we owe them a service in our job as engineers to make sure we're not exposing them unduly to risk. Obviously, everything has some risk, but it's our job to make sure that we're not overdoing it. And so, for me, that's what really helped was having seeing it and seeing these plants in action. Everyone's probably a little bit different, but I do think there's a lot of value. We're in front of computers a lot. We're in front of spreadsheets a lot. Standard engineering stuff. Getting out and seeing it in action to go, okay, this thing that I've done, this HAZOP I've just done, this is the outcome of it. Or this design, I think there's nothing more valuable than working on a big greenfield project and then going and seeing it in operation and talking to the guys who have to operate this thing 24/7 and having them go, that thing sucks. I have to go up this bloody ladder, once a week to test this thing or what, and go, okay, right. Why do we do that?
Sorry, boys.
Yeah, we'll go, well, why do we do it? And go, oh, yeah, you know what? In design, it was because that was going to cost a little bit more or a little bit less or whatever. Or we just didn't think of it. Like, we got it wrong.
We got it wrong.
But yeah, to kind of go, I think there's a lot of value in that because when you then might move to another bit of your career and you might go back into design work or something, you can then take those experiences and say, look, in this design world, this is one thing, but this guy's someone's going to live with this for 15 or 20 years. And, we owe them to make sure their life isn't unduly stressful or dangerous, more importantly, but for something that with some decision we made. So yeah, I think,
the tangibility, like the tangible interface to be able to look at it and go, like, this is how it all flows together, and to see what you've designed kind of come out of the pages or come off the computer screen and to be able to be done. But the best feedback is the operators by any stretch of the imagination. The operator and maintenance staff, and they're sitting there cursing you guys.
Yeah.
And
why is
cursing the team, going, what have you guys done here? Like, you microdosing today?
Yeah. It's like, why is that valve up there and the thing's down here and it go over there? And yeah. No, it's you think.
So, guys, and then you can't go and sit there and go, guys, it's all right. Like, we're process engineers. You worry about the maintenance, we'll worry about the process.
Yeah, it's like, we're the ones that have to deal with it. So, and the thing is, like, you do enough incident investigations, you realize that if you've done, going back to that human factors side and sort of just culture and stuff, if you've designed something, it's very easy to fall in the trap and go, we're just engineers. We're not the guys operating this thing. Yeah. So, the incident's never going to be, it's like, actually, a lot of the time, the incident, when you really boil down to it, it's not all the time, but there's a decent percentage of incidents where they're going to come down to us because the guy who cut that corner is maybe cutting that corner because the thing we designed couldn't be operated in the way that it was meant to be, or it was so painfully difficult to operate in that way, or it was just, let's face it, inefficient. Humans, classic thing, humans will find efficiencies where they can. Doesn't mean they're lazy or incompetent, and it might mean that they're stepping outside the bounds of procedure, which they shouldn't do, but sometimes, we don't set them up for success in that way. And so, again, we're not going to get 100% right. I've never seen a design of a thing where everyone goes, that's perfect. Look at that thing. It's amazing. Always something. You're always going to miss something.
Because if it did, it would, if it was, let's be honest, it would just be like Control-C, Control-V.
Everyone would just make that thing.
You just copy and paste that whole thing all the
that's
time.
how you make gas plants.
Let's go back to that one. That one worked. Exactly.
But we can still do our best endeavors to try and, again, a bit of a cliche, but set people up for success. Make sure they're not, we're not making things unduly difficult for them. And I mean, I'm a little bit biased this way, but the I just find in projects there can be this big disconnect between capex and opex. The people who design the facilities aren't the people who run these facilities often. And yes, obviously you're going to have operational people involved, but they can't be everywhere at the same time. And you probably don't have engineers who are necessarily operations engineers involved in the design part. So, you have people design a thing to be run who are looking at one metric, how much is it going to cost for us to build this thing? More than happy to push costs into OPEX. And if you had the OPEX people there, they'd be like more than happy to push costs into CAPEX to reduce their, and the sweet spot's somewhere in between, but usually those guys don't get too much of a say over here. So by the time they're lumped with it, they're lumped with doing things. They're spending the money or not spending the money and having to cut the corners to not spend the money because certain decisions were made over here to save a few bucks. And that just, again, businesses aren't charities, but if people on projects could be maybe a little bit more, future sighted to say, this is going to cost us X dollars more, but it's going to save us maybe even dollars, but certainly operational efficiencies later would be amazing.
Yeah.
I think we are getting smarter in that space, but I think it's a long way to
go. I think we are, and I think that also comes from a perception, specifically in large scale projects, perception that increased cost at the CapEx stage means a decrease in OpEx costs, and there's no correlation between the two. There is none. It's like if you think because you're spending this amount on your CapEx, then therefore there's a magic ratio between that and your operational expenditure at the end of it. No, it doesn't. But that's just a transition that the industry is taking, and as more knowledge comes into the industry, as more projects are successfully completed, and with more uptake around safety culture and implementing the design philosophy and the safety philosophy into day-to-day operations, I think we'll see a more realistic shift between realistic expendiprobably on both sides. Yeah. I think that's what will happen.
I think, to that, I think, you're right. We're seeing probably better, and it's been coming for a long time, and we're just somewhere on that journey, but engineering around humans, I remember going to an offshore conference in Aberdeen in like 2005, like ages ago, 20 years ago. Jeez. And there was an OIM standing up, and I can't remember what company it was from. And he was talking about idiot-proof design. He was like, look, and then, he was like, we're going down this journey where we make systems inherently safer, which is good. Don't get me wrong. It's always good. Like, make systems, idiot-proof. But said, again, that cliche, we're just going to make better idiots. And he said, and this is 20 years ago, like, we have to accept the fact that there's always going to be a human involved, well, nearly always, and we have to design for the fact that human could make a mistake and just allow for humans to be imperfect. I think we are getting better at that. So when we look at human factors in design and stuff like that, and how humans operate, yes, they've got to be compliant. We've got to train them. We've got to do assurance and all those things. It's not saying that people just have license to do what the hell they want. But we also need to make sure that if they do make a mistake, because a human will at some point make a mistake, we've done what we can within the bounds of practicability to remove the terrible consequence and replace it with a lighter one.
Yeah.
But I think we're getting better at that. So I think, whether that's a CapEx thing or an OpEx, I think we're just being aware that it's an issue, and therefore we need to look at it in design and take it into account.
They'll probably create something like empathetic engineering design or something like that. I'm not making light of it, but it's what you've touched on, the human aspect. So true, because yes, we are all human. Yes, we are striving to do the right thing, and we all understand that businesses do need to make money, but because we're human, we're bringing in human elements and human emotions into the workforce. Like you like everyone, you have a bad day. Something goes wrong at work. You've had a fight with your partner at home, or your kids. You're a newborn, like you've got a newborn, or you've got family issues, or you've got sickness in the family, all the myriad of other possibilities that there could be out there. You're bringing that mind space into work, and you're going to make a mistake. You just are. And to say it's easy for people to just, from a pulpit go, we need to make idiot proofs. You can't, because there's going to be.
I was going to say that was OAM's point of going. You were never going to make a facility, no matter how solid you make your functional safety, how sort of executive, you're never going to make a facility idiot proof. And so there's always going to be the ability for a human to make a mistake. And if that human making a mistake causes a catastrophic outcome, causes your major accident event, then you need to design it better. Because if your human is your sort of 100% must be reliable safety system, then you just can't have that.
If you do find that one, exactly, let's put him into a lab to get him and gene spliced, and we'll be fine with that as well.
Yeah.
So we've got the IDC conference coming up to shift gears and change everything. So you're one of the speakers. Do you want to tell us what you're going to talk about?
I can. Yeah. I had to double check what I said I would talk about. So obviously it's hydrogen focused. And so one thing, so GEXCON, like we said before, process set consultancy, and we do a lot of hydrogen work. As there's a fair bit going on in Australia. And I was realizing when I was thinking about what to talk about this one, I was sort of thinking, well, one question we get a fair bit, not every project, because not every project has this flexibility, but when people are looking at storage particularly, this question comes up of, well, okay, we're looking at compressed gas, 500 bar or something. Would we be better looking at liquefaction and storing it as liquid hydrogen? What's safer? And in fact, I think it might have even been this conference last year or another one where someone actually asked that question. What's safer, liquid or compressed gaseous hydrogen? And so I thought, well, I'm going to do a presentation on it. So, and without spoilers, it's not really an argument one way or the other, because I don't think you really can make that argument. It's just different, but it's a comparison between the two. So, obviously they're both hydrogen, so most of the characteristics are exactly the same. One's really high pressure and one's really, really cold. And so they do have some unique hazards, around that pressure and around that low temperature. We have done a few risk comparisons as well. We have actually done a few projects where we did sensitivities of both. And so it does sort of shift the risk profile a little bit. As you can imagine, high pressure gas, if you had an igniter release of that, you tend to have sort of pretty big fires. Liquid hydrogen, you don't have that pressure behind it, but you do have, because of the expansion ratio, you do have huge volumes. Yeah, so you can have a very big gas cloud really quickly. It may not be a pressurized release, but you could have like this big drifting gas cloud that if ignited, you can have an explosion. So you kind of tend to have explosion risk versus fire risk. But yeah, so it's a discussion on that. I've got some good videos, as we often do for GEXCON. The characteristics, dispersion characteristics, they're probably the most different. That discussion about risk profile. And that's the main thing. Some Q&A, hopefully. Again, we often get some good questions about both of them, just because from what we've seen, there haven't been too many people who have done a lot of both yet. People tend to have a project which is looking at LH2 or they're looking at GH2, and they're not necessarily looking at both. And so we've done one or two, but most projects are really built around one or the other. So
I think BOC is probably a fairly good case study candidate for that, because they're transitioning from gaseous to cryogenic transfer. I think they're making that transition now, but it will be really interesting to see the comparison between the two technologies, and also to have some real data on what projects are coming online, how it's not so much about like how to mitigate all the controls out, but what to be aware of when you're choosing your technology for your application.
Yeah, so we deliberately don't go into, like, obviously there's a lot of other factors other than safety as to what's the right solution and practicalities and all those sort of things. And so we sort of acknowledge that, look, it might be a no-brainer for your project, depending on what it is. But you're right. I think we are seeing a bit more of a shift towards LH2, particularly for anything where they need stored energy. Whether it's he's spoken a lot about now with trucking. I think it's a Mercedes truck is an LH2 truck, or they're bringing one out. When you need energy density, it does actually starts making sense.
Yes.
And so, I think we're seeing a few more of those projects, whereas 2 years ago, there weren't that many LH2 projects around. There was all GH2, still a bit of both. But we sort of don't go into this is the project considerations. Like, you guys are project engineers, you know your own considerations. And cost would obviously be one of them as well. But we're just sort of looking just at the process safety side. Look, this is what gas plumes look like. This is what jet fires look like. This is, other things to consider. Like LH2 has a number of interesting considerations when you're doing your HAZOP, for instance, just because it's so cold. And the freezing elements, like LNG, but on steroids, in terms of things freezing and freezing in your process and all that sort of stuff. It's a little bit more interesting. So we talk about that sort of things to be aware of if you were looking at this versus this. And as I said, sort of standard process safety are a bit wishy-washy. I don't think we actually draw a conclusion because it's horses for courses. There's no actual right answer, depending on what you're doing. So, well,
you have to set the parameters, and we'll design the process safety around it. Please don't ask the inverse question.
Yeah. But I mean, we've spoken to the material, sort of similar material before, and it's gone down well. So hopefully it goes down well as well.
I'm hoping because we've been on this journey for a while, you and I, Derek. I'm hoping that probably next year we can have like a little bingo card of questions, like like how much does it cost to produce hydrogen at this, tick, and then someone can win a bingo at the end of it. Take your bingo cards and let's
go ask someone else. I always stay out of the finance stuff because I never know the answers. But no, and that was actually, as I said, that was part of the reasoning for this topic. Was I was thinking back to stuff that people have asked, and this was one of the topics, one of the questions. And again, I have been asked this at a conference, but I've been asked it more often in project meetings where people are like, "Oh, we're kind of thinking of this as an option. What would it do? What would it mean?" Interestingly, we did a QRA. I don't think we talk about this, and maybe we do. We did a QRA, so a quantitative risk assessment, where we did both cases, and it was actually very similar. It didn't, unfortunately. I think the client was hoping one would be like a real, like much smaller risk, and it just wasn't because that risk profile shifts between the jet fire and the explosion. Cause of the risk changed, but the actual overall risk wasn't that different. And again, different projects might be different, but that particular project, the risk profiles are really similar. So,
it's as you mentioned, like that's the expectation. They're wanting to see what will be better when it's not a difference between versus, it's just different. It's just application's going to be completely different, and whatever your outcome, whatever your preference for your outcome is, that's what you just have to know, that's the shift of your risk profile, and then you put your mitigating factors around them.
Actually, I tell a lie. One of the cases was different, but it was because we originally did 700 versus liquid, and then when we did 350, the risk profile was much lower, but that's to be expected because you've got that much less hydrogen stored. The flip side to that was it was that trade-off between sort of like it was sort of trading it to operational risk because they had, in that case you'd have to store it at 350, you'd have to do transfers that much more often, so into their storage. So it was kind of like, well, in terms of risk, leak, process safety risk, it's less, but in terms of overall risk, including the operational risk to the guys doing the job, probably it's about the same. So all
right, well, thank you for taking the time today to talk to us. So if one last plug, if people want to know more about what you're doing about GEXCON, where can they find you?
I'm on LinkedIn. We do a website, GEXCON. So GEXCON is actually a Norwegian company. We are all over the world. We've got about 16 offices. And so if you look up gexcon.com, you'll come to our website. You can come to the conference. But also
cheeky little plug there.
Yeah. But probably the easiest thing is if you reach out via the website usually. Obviously our email and everything as well, but the contact part of our website then comes, if it's if you're in our part of the world, it will find its way to us. If you're in other parts of the world, it will go to the respective office. But yeah. So that's one of the easiest ways.
We'll put some links and details in the description below.
Yeah, if you put my email in, then
everyone can reach out to you.
I'm more than happy for people to reach out directly as well.
People will
That's
spam
fine.
you. Go, I love you, Derek.
Yeah. Hopefully not. No
All
worries.
right, well, thank you once again, and look forward to talking to you at the event, and we'll catch up then.
Yep. All right.
No worries.
Great.
Thanks.
Peace out.